Hello and welcome back. We're going to be talking about sketching today in this lesson. And sketching is really interesting. there's so many different ways we can use sketching for user experience design. One thing I really like to do is use it just for idea generation. And, we're going to learn about that. We're going to learn about the process. We're going to learn about sketching different types of flows and some tips in between. So let's jump right in. We're going to start with an intro to sketching. So sketching is a two-step process. It's very important to remember. Designers consider their options and then proceed to work out those details. That first step is called idea generation. And what we want to do here is we want to approach a new product and generate as many ideas as we can. It isn't uncommon for us to be missing certain ideas or elements or details, but it's just about getting ideas out there quickly. Doesn't matter. It isn't really focusing on the detail just at this moment. Generate as many approaches and then decide on which one is the most efficient for the task you're trying to solve for. The next step is adding detail and refinement. So step by step, you work on refining those sketches and then adding more detail. It's okay to kill some of your ideas here, and that's the point. So don't really get bogged down by all the messy sketches or the lack of detail. Just keep on going and refining, and it'll come over time. Now let's jump right into how we actually take a look at that process and we go from idea generation all the way to refinement. Now that first step is generating ideas like we just spoke about. Now these are the initial sketches you basically create, and they have lower level details. They have no colors usually, maybe some colors to signify key parts of the sketch, but the goal here is to draw a lot of basic sketches. You'll notice here that there's just like a square, an arrow, some text. At this point, like I said, just generating as many options as you possibly can. Don't get bogged down by those details. From here, we're going to start really kind of refining and start adding some details, and we can start making some sketch-like wireframes. And you'll notice that your promising sketches start to lead to more detailed view. And it may not have all the details still, and that's totally fine, but it will have a lot of the key details, and you want to refine those from those sketches that you had over here. So you'll notice that we start adding a little more elements and different types of UI elements up here and down here, buttons, different types of inputs. This is when we're starting to think a little bit more about interaction. Now, it will feature a lot more detail flows as well. So we'll get into this soon. Don't worry about that. The next step, so when I'm getting into visual design and start thinking much more about these wireframes in much more detail, I'm actually going to refine a lot of sketches and start to pull out certain elements that I think are really needed. So I'll start to realize that as I start building out these kind of components, I'm going to need buttons, I'm going to need different inputs, I'm going to need to account for different types of content. And that's really going to help us in the future when we're thinking about the different types of requirements that we need. That is the basic process from going from ideas all the way to components. Next, we're going to be talking about entire sketching process. Welcome back. We're going to talk about the sketching process in a little bit more detail. There's a couple different steps and steps within those steps that I want to talk about and touch upon so that when you start sketching, you're just ready. That first step is be prepared. Always be prepared. Prepare your tools beforehand. Lots of papers, pens, markers, pencils, whatever works for you, even if it's a tablet. We also want to think about what our goals are. You can think about what you're trying to solve for. Maybe it's a certain flow, maybe it's a certain interaction, but that should always be the center of your attention. We're also going to think about our audience. This is really important. If it's for yourself, go crazy. Be as messy as you want. You don't really need to annotate anything, as long as you understand your own process. But if it's for somebody like a client or a stakeholder or your teammates, you need to clean them up a bit. So maybe add a bit more detail and explain your thought process so you don't waste time trying to explain it while you're presenting it to them. Remember, always time box yourself. This is one of the best pieces of advice I ever got in my career is to time box anything. Time box your sketching, presentations. Keep yourself under a time limit because it'll help you focus on sketching for your goal, and it'll put a little pressure on you to just throw out those ideas, not get bogged down by those details like we talked about earlier. So don't worry about them being messy. Just time box yourself, and I promise you'll just produce a bunch. Step 2. Now what you want to do here is just start. Just go. Draw a frame for your device. Is it a browser? Is it a desktop window? In this case right here, we have a little mobile frame. So it just needs to be a frame. It's just going to help you kind of guide your sketch a bit. The next step is to think about the bigger picture and more basic elements that are much more redundant that you'll see. They'll really help you kind of frame your sketches, whether it's a footer, it's a header. Think about those elements that you're going to be seeing a lot of. And then from there, move on to some of the more detailed elements and the more detailed interactions. Have fun. Start sketching those interactions. Keep them very simple at this stage. All you need is 1 or 2 shapes. Squares, circles, rectangles. That can make up any sketch. You'll notice here that they're just using rectangles. We have circles. We have lines. They get their point across pretty well. Now, this is really important. This is one of my messy sketches. So I want you to just annotate and document your sketches. The worst thing is looking back and not understanding what you sketched before. You're going to be creating messy sketches, and sometimes you may not understand what you drew the day before or the week before whenever you revisit them. So the thing you need to do is just be as detailed as you can, but just quickly point out some certain reasoning or proposed interactions. Like over here, I have some titles. I have some text explaining what the interaction is. It just really helps give a little bit more context to what you're drawing. Now, what I need you to do is just keep going. Find the sketches you like and start building alternatives from that. Don't just stop. Organize the ones that you think have the potential and keep on going. And what's going to really help you do that is by sharing them. Share those sketches, bring them to your product team to discuss. If you're working beside them, just tap them on the shoulder, set a meeting time, just get everyone in a room to just talk about certain things that you've been working on, whether it's an interaction, whether it's an overall flow. I like uploading my sketches into Figma sometimes, and I share that document with the team and people can comment. I also just bring printouts or originals. So if I'm sketching on paper, I'm just bringing my paper there, or if I'm sketching within like a tablet or something, I'm bringing that printout. What I'm doing is I'm just talking to everyone. It doesn't matter. Developers, product managers, QA, everyone has valuable insight that you should really tap into. And after you get some feedback, you can start building off of those sketches a bit more. This is an ongoing process for every type of feature that you're going to design. The last step is refining. So how do you clarify your sketches? So you have some sketches indicating some sort of flow or interaction, and you want to clean them up a bit or think through them a bit more, but they're a bit messy and unorganized, and that's okay. So what do? Add titles. You really want to add titles for all your sketches. They really help you understand which screens are relevant and without thinking too much about it. This is so useful if you have a bunch of sketches like we see here. And yes, annotate again. I know I mentioned this before, but here it is again. Annotations are like little notes right beside elements that explain its purpose. They also really help clarify certain things that are just too hard to draw. So it's really great. So like over here, you can see that there's a bunch of different annotations in regards to the sketch and these different UI elements. But we also can use numbers. Try numbering your sketches. It can really help define where certain sketches within a flow or interaction. It helps speed up discussions, and it really helps others to try and make sense of where something fits in within your sketches. It also helps others to point out certain numbers when they're giving you some feedback. So they could just say, hey, Daniel, screen 3, I love it. We're going to keep that the same. And it really helps you gather that feedback as well if you're taking notes. Definitely use arrows. Arrows help to indicate a transition. So we can see here that if somebody interacts with this element, something else is going to happen and may push them in 2 different directions. Even though I don't necessarily understand this flow, I do know that something's happening here that's going to push them in 2 different directions. And that's with no context whatsoever. You can only imagine what somebody with context could see and the level of detail and context you can give them. So remember, use arrows. That can really help indicate where there's a page transition or even an interaction transition. And lastly, if you're feeling a little brave, you can start drawing some gestures for certain interactions. These are a bit hard, and there's a bunch of different ways you can kind of do this. You can try to use little circles. You can use arrows to indicate them. But what I usually do is I sketch really quickly, and I'm not really worried about like refining like these gesture sketches. What I'll do is I'll just go right over to the developer that I'm working with or developers and have a conversation. I mean, I run it by them and try to explain this in person, maybe even sketch on a whiteboard, and so they can really understand my intention and I can get some insight into what they think about the interaction. These are the different types of things you can do when you're thinking about the actual sketching process. Next, we're going to jump into actually sketching some UX flows. Hello and welcome back. We're going to be sketching some UX flows. You can tell that I'm on a tablet here because I just want to demonstrate how we can sketch those flows without using paper. A lot of people like to use tablets, and I'm using an application called Concepts. It's a free application. You can pay for some additional features, but I'm not paying right now. And I can just like draw. I can export this as a JPEG and send it to myself if I need it. And that's all we really need for sketching. So I totally recommend it if you want to go the digital route. You can even do it in Figma. And yeah, so I mean, you can just grab your pen. You can even change the size of it. If you want to get a little more thick there, if you double tap with 2 fingers, you'll just go back. This is your eraser. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to keep it pretty. I think that's good. Also, you can select different types of pens. So what we'll do is, right now we're using a regular pen. There's the fixed width pen. That's something that I rather use just for actually drawing wireframes. So let's bring that down. I think it's a little too thick. Okay, perfect. Now we're ready to go. Here we're going to be focusing on a user's experience through certain journeys, both big and small. Before we even jump into those types of journeys, I just want to give you a little understanding of what I'm asking myself every time I approach something like this. Step 1, I want to understand what I need to draw. So I got to figure out exactly what I'm thinking of sketching. Do I want to sketch a large journey, or am I thinking about a small interaction? Step 2 is defining some sort of starting point. You can start at the beginning of a journey, or in the middle, or at the end. You choose what you think is best. Typically, I like to start thinking about the most difficult or riskiest parts of the product first. Some people actually like to start at the end and work their way backwards to figure out how users get to a certain point. Like I said, it's whatever works for you. Step 3, decide your next steps. After you define that first starting point within your flow, you need to know where to go. Well, that is up to you, and you need to ask yourself some important questions. Which way does this step lead our users? Where do you want them to go? What does the user need to do to get there? In the end, when I'm thinking about alternate scenarios or alternate flows that I'm trying to sketch, I think about all the different questions in terms of alternative ways that a person can go through a certain route. So what options do they have? What happens if the user closes the app at this point? Where will they resume? So these are the types of questions I'm always asking myself every time I approach a sketch. So let's start with our very first sketch. We're going to talk about mapping overall flow. Think about a user's journey through the product. That's like from point A all the way to point B. We want to understand when they come in and when they leave and what that experience is like. It's like creating some sort of customer journey. And here we can really outline different types of pain points when they're feeling happy through this journey, when they're feeling sad, and pick out different types of opportunities where we can really improve that experience for them. And also understand where exactly we can branch out and focus on different types of flows. Let's start sketching a general journey. It doesn't need to be neat. It needs to be just a little, you need to be able to understand it. We're going to start sketching a flow here. The first one I'm thinking about is mapping the overall journey for our client habitual. So if I think about step 1, I'm just going to put 1, I'm going to draw a frame. And we're not really focusing on UI elements here or anything like that. I just want to think about what the user is possibly seeing, what screens they possibly are going to, and what they're expecting. So when they come to our application, they may see a welcome screen. and like some sort of button. Maybe it's an onboarding process. We can figure that out later, but now like we've kind of established that. Step 2, let's create another frame. Maybe the user, when they come here, they're thinking about searching right away. They want to find a product. That's why they would use something like habitual. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw like maybe home screen. That looks like a queue. That still looks like a cube. That's fine. We're going to just draw like some boxes. Okay, so they come to this home screen, and what they're going to do is they're going to search for a product. And the next step is that they're going to actually find that product. So they find their product and they go and research those details. And from here, after they've done that, they're interested in actually purchasing it. But right now, you'll notice that this is a very happy flow. This is like what we really want our users to do every single time they come into our product. And that's not always the case. So they'll probably see like a cart with a little X. Maybe there's like a checkout button. There are details of whatever they're purchasing, whatever product they want to buy. And if we move that over, okay, a little messy, but that's okay. I mean, we're getting a general sense of what this journey is looking like. And they get some sort of confirmation that the package has shipped. That you bought it and it's right out the door. And then I don't think the journey really ends there. We need to think about what happens after it's shipped. In this scenario, it's delivered and the user is happy. So this is what our whole flow starts to look like. User comes in and is welcomed by us. They search for a product. They find that product and review it, add it to their cart and check it out. The package ships and it is delivered to them and everyone is happy. Now that always doesn't happen, and this is where I'm asking myself, well, we asked ourselves the question of what the goal was. The goal was to sketch the whole journey. We thought about what steps come next, but we didn't really think of alternate scenarios. So what happens if they can't find their product? There's a scenario there. If they can't find their product, maybe they have to go through some category searches. So they start searching based off of categories. Or they start maybe reading reviews. There's different things that we need to always take into account. Not very rarely, and this is an assumption, and we always try to validate our assumption, but my assumption is that very rarely that everyone goes through the same exact flow. Maybe they want to read reviews. So we're starting to think about all the different types of scenarios that a user may experience in their journey. Maybe over here, they're happy. So we can give them a good onboarding experience. And over here, when they're searching, maybe they're a little confused, and maybe this is a great way to implement a really easy search experience that makes them happy. Oops. So maybe we can really capitalize on that opportunity. We really need to think about who our users are and what they really want to experience when they're moving through our app. So that's how you map an overall flow using sketching. And if you wanted to, like I said before, you can just export this, bring it into Figma, clean it up a bit, and start thinking about it there if you want to. But that's how you map an overall flow. Welcome back, and we're going to jump right into sketching more flows. This time, we're going to focus on screen flows. Now here, you should really focus on a user's actions through a specific flow. It could be a small sequence of screens, or it could be a journey that branches. So let's think about our client again. This could be a user who actually searches for a product. So let's get in there. So I'm just gonna title this. I mean, it's really hard to kind of draw on this tablet, but I'm not gonna really title everything. We can just say like search, zoom out, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna just draw a frame here. Perfect. Once again, not really worrying about the details here, but we're gonna just focus on how does a user complete this flow properly? How do they achieve their goal of finding a product? What I'm going to do is I think, they'll come to the home page and they may access our search bar. There may be a navigation. I'm not sure what those navigation items are just yet, but this is what the makeup of the page is thus far. After they interact with that, The next sequence is a user sees results. So pardon my messiness, but that's okay. So they'll see some results, and over here, we'll have some images. I know that there's going to be some sort of content here, and this is going to really help me start building some sort of requirements that I need to account for when I'm designing elements. So like I know that there's these cards that have an image, they have some text. I'm not sure what that text is. It could be a product name, it could be a combination of that plus price, plus other elements. But I do know that when they do click over here in this area, we're going to move over. Step 3 would probably be something like a product description. So we'll just write item. So, I mean, you don't need to copy exactly what I'm doing. I really urge you to think outside the box, take some time to just sketch out. I mean, you can use a tablet, whatever really works for you. The item description, I'm starting to really think about some of the content that's going there. It could be like a name. Let's get in there and start writing a little bit of content. Price could be over here. There could be like options to change color. I'm not sure exactly, but there's some text. And then maybe there's like a button sticky to the bottom that says like add to cart. Just double tap with 2 fingers in concept and you'll be able to actually just go back. So if I go like this, double tap, perfect. Next step, they've clicked that button, they've added that to their cart. Step 4. Actually, you know what? If they add that to the cart, they found the item, they'll probably just go to the cart and, we'll end the flow right here. I think we can actually start thinking about alternate scenarios. So they've added their item to a cart. Perfect. And maybe there's a checkout button over there. Another interesting thing is we start thinking about different things like hierarchy. So if navigation's sticky to the bottom, maybe we start using that for primary buttons and start sticking other things to the top, which are a little bit more harder to access on mobile. Just different things we're starting to think about in terms of like page hierarchy. It's really going to help us influence like ways we start building sitemaps and actually start building that page hierarchy. Let's think about different alternate flow. What we know here is that we made the assumption that they're going to come in and they're going to click that search bar. But there's other ways to actually find a product. And this is where we can start thinking about other ways to make this process a little bit easier. So we'll label this 1 and we'll just call this home. But what happens if we really think about like placing products strategically there? Products for our user. So we do know that the application that we are building is for a personalized shopping experience, like a really personalized shopping experience based off of their habits, based off of their interests. And we could really push items at the front and really hope that these users will go down that funnel instead of actually just searching. We want to make this experience much more enjoyable and more catered to them. So we could really like take advantage of that. So we'll start thinking about, maybe there are images here of products that they could like, or products based off of their interests, products that maybe they're in their wish list and are on sale. So we start thinking about these different types of scenarios. It looks like an F. I just fixed that. So if they do come to the home screen, they could actually tap on one of these products here. And if they do, the next step in their flow would be to actually go for the item description page that we actually built over here. So we start thinking about all those different scenarios, and look at that. We already kind of came up with a little user flow and an optional user flow. We should always think about more than one scenario when we're building something like this, because there always is more than one scenario and one route to get to a certain page or reach a certain goal. This is really going to help influence our page hierarchies, like I mentioned before, and sitemaps. That's how you draw screen flows. We're back in concepts on my iPad, and we're going to be sketching navigation schemes. Now, navigation schemes really help you figure out which options your users can choose, the directions they can move in, and various parts of your product. It helps to define your navigation and the hierarchies within. I always do this at the beginning, and it really helps influence my user flows later and my sitemaps. Basically, this is the structure of your product. So what I like to do is, let's just title this quickly. So number 3 is a different type of flow, and we're going to call it structure. I like to call it structure. There we go. Okay. So number 3. Now, what we're trying to do here is we're really trying to think about navigation schemes. We're trying to think about that structure of our product. Sometimes I start thinking about the different types of screens that we actually do need. The one screen I know we need and that we've actually had sketched a couple times is our home screen. That's that main screen that somebody comes to. So when I think about the home screen, I'm thinking about maybe a welcome message on top. Maybe there's a profile image, just different things like that. I mentioned certain things like having product images at the top. So we can start thinking about that a bit more and what that could look like and what that experience can feel like. Maybe there's some deals at the bottom. But I do know that there is some sort of homepage. So we can kind of create a little icon here. Now, when I think about a user moving through this app, maybe they have a saved page as well. Sometimes we don't want to buy a product right away, or we're waiting for a sale and we just save it to some sort of wish list or something like that. So let's have a saved page. I think that's a really smart way of allowing users to keep track of their products. So maybe there's some text there. We have some sort of persistent UI or navigation at the bottom. And over here, it could be something really simple, like just a list of products that they have with some details. Maybe there's a call to action here that, add it to your cart and buy it right away. Maybe this is synced to some sort of notification, like when a product goes on sale. But we could start thinking about okay, we have a home page and maybe we have a saved page as well. I do know one thing we do need for sure, and that is a cart. And we need to make that much more prominent, because if a user adds something to a cart, we want that to be right at the bottom or right in a place where a user can see it and click it easily and notice that maybe there's a notification there. So let's create a little cart screen. And now I'm starting to think more about that hierarchy. I mentioned it a little bit in the last video, but maybe there's a button at the bottom. And if you notice, we've had a persistent bottom navigation over here and over here. And what we've done is we kind of switched that up a bit. At the bottom here, now we have a button that links them to the checkout process. And it'll allow them to easily tap that, especially on mobile, and especially using that kind of design pattern. We're allowing them to click easily and then putting the option to go backwards up top, which is a little bit more harder. But if a user is going to cart, my assumption at least is that they want to check out, review their products, check out quickly. So we want to make that experience really quick. So we have several navigation pieces over here. Cart could live in here as well. Let's draw a little cart. That's going to have to work. Okay, so now we know some basic navigation pieces that we like. Now we can start thinking about our home screen a little bit more. So if we redraw it here, see about making your sketches messy. It doesn't really matter about the details too much. Those start to kind of come naturally later on. If I start thinking about where these different things lead, I can start thinking about the structure of our whole product. So I know that there's a home page, and that's the first layer. This is layer 1. But on layer 2, I can actually go straight to a product page. So I know that's on layer 2. And from there, I can go into checkout. So I start thinking about different ways I can prioritize certain tasks that are really important to a user and really important to our business goals. Okay, there's our cart. But now we start thinking about that. We can also start thinking about, well, what happens after this scenario? A user has gone through the checkout process and they get that nice, happy screen, and their item has shipped. Well, don't you often keep track of your orders? I know I do, but we can test that assumption later. Maybe there's a different navigation piece. We talked about a profile, the little profile button at the top, and maybe that leads to like a user settings page or like your current orders, but doesn't seem like that is prioritized, and maybe that should be prioritized. So maybe we could create an order screen. So if we go back up, maybe there is an order screen. And let's draw that up just quickly. Right here, we can start thinking about maybe you can search your existing orders. I'm not sure if that's a feature we would build right away, but we want to build like the minimum viable product, the pieces, the features that users really want right away. So if we think about what you would see on an order screen, you'd probably see your products that you ordered, their details, and maybe the status. There's multiple statuses that we need to think about, and this is what I mean when we're talking about the different requirements that just naturally surface when we start thinking about different components on a page. Right here, this could be a product that has been shipped, and there's like a map with a tracker that's like pulsing. You can start thinking about things like motion a bit. Maybe over here, this is a delivered one. So we could start thinking that, we have maybe a fourth navigation piece. I would argue that, your search is a part of your navigation because it's a very prominent feature for a product like this. Being able to search and find products is so important. So from here, what I would naturally do is I would start kind of, sketching a little bit more screens, thinking about how these different screens link together. I would actually start building some sort of like mini sitemap. So I know that home is like my ground zero. And from home, if I move over, I get items, the product description. I can get to, what else can I get to? I can get to like a category possibly. So let's write that in. And there's other things like, okay, so this product is about personalization. Maybe there's like an interesting portion about like interest. Maybe that's front and center on something like a product like this. So maybe there's like, I don't know, a component around interest. So I start thinking about these types of navigation trees. We can also think about saved as well. Like we created a saved page. So if I make a little box here for a saved and I go down, I can start thinking about where saved actually leads. I know I have products. I can go to an item description page, and that obviously can lead to the cart. This isn't an entirely complex product, but it's a lot of different ways you can find certain pages. From saved, I could probably go directly to a checkout. That would be awesome, especially if something comes up as like on sale or like a flash sale. That would prompt a lot of people to probably just bite the bullet and buy what's in their wish list. Maybe we have other items that are relevant to them and whatever's in their wish list. Maybe if they have something in relation to like shoes, maybe there's another pair of shoes that we can kind of push to them and hopefully they'll choose those pairs. It really depends. So we can start thinking about this navigation tree, which will definitely affect how we build out our sitemaps. So that's how you can take an approach at sketching navigation schemes. It's a really easy way to just kind of get that overview of your application. I mean, we just kind of scratched the surface over here, but I urge you to kind of go back. You don't necessarily need to copy exactly what I did here. But like I said before, use what you think is best, whether that's like paper, do it digitally, refine them, ask questions constantly, never stop asking questions because you'll find different routes like we did. And that's navigation schemes. Hey, and welcome back. We are going to be talking about sketching screen states. Now, I love sketching screen states. This focuses on drawing the entire screen or different interactions. An example is a user comes to a search page, clicks on a search bar, an overlay pops up, they type, get suggested searches. You get the point. We start thinking about those little micro interactions as well. That's the fun part too. I spend a lot of my time actually drawing these. So let's go back to our client. Let's think about something that we can work on. I kind of gave a little example about searching for a product, and I think that's a good way to kind of start. Let's think about our home screen just a little bit more. So let's just title that. And what I'm going to do is, well, you'll notice that I'm not really writing any annotations because they're kind of illegible. But since we're doing this together, get out your sketchpad, keep on going. You know what I'm drawing, and we don't really need them in this case. So if I start to think about this in a little bit more detail, I start to think about, well, what are the kind of like the different types of features and different types of elements that this page should have. We talked about a profile image. We have a search here as well. And we could start thinking about, well, we created a saved page. How does a user save an item? So we have our item here. Maybe it's a little heart on each image. I don't know. I kind of like that. I start to think about different things like the user can see in relation to that image, that type of content that's really important. So if we zoom in, I start thinking about like the product name, start thinking about like maybe there's the price, maybe there's some product information if that's useful. I'm not sure. Is there a button? Can users click this whole section? Is it like a card? That's really going to be up to you and what you think is best for users. Typically, I don't like placing like little buttons over here and just limiting a user. Because like on mobile, you want to tap larger surface areas. You got to make your buttons much larger too. In this case, I probably will use like a card. I'm not sure just yet, but something to start thinking about. So this probably like this interaction, when I'm thinking about it, maybe it's a carousel. So when the user kind of swipes left, what will happen is this will go there and we'll kind of start getting images that go left to right, which is pretty cool. So those will go left to right. But let's think a little bit more about this home screen. I mentioned like thinking about interests. We can start thinking about like ways that fits into the app. Maybe there's like a interest title and like a see all thing, where they can go find more interests or maybe edit their current interests. Maybe they'll see items in relation to certain categories and they can click on them and put them into a different funnel. So I'm starting to think a little bit more detail in terms of like what's on the page, what I need to account for when I'm building a product. And that's really helpful, especially with screen states. So we did talk about search. So what happens if you actually click this search over here? Let's draw a state. When somebody clicks a search, I'm thinking like an overlay will pop up. What does that interaction look like? So let's just start ground zero, number one. We'll just name it overlay. Maybe an overlay pops from top to bottom. There's a little X with the search. We're on mobile, so we have to remember that, there's a keyboard here. It's a lot of rectangles. We also need to remember that these keyboards have some sort of large button that can be used as like an enter. So that's an alternate way for them to select something. So if they're writing something in there, if they're typing something in there, we need to start thinking about what happens. So once they start typing, we'll stay in the same screen. Everything up here will stay the same. But now we'll start getting some type ahead result. Here, let's zoom in so we can write a little bit more neatly. So if I start typing in something like book, we're going to change our pen weight just a little bit more. And we can bold it and say something like books for 8+. And that's a great way just to kind of like make the user's life a little bit easier. Maybe they're looking for a bookshelf. So we can do the same there where we just bring that down and it'll be like shelf. It'll just finish off the rest. So it's just kind of auto-suggesting, auto-completing for them. So we start thinking about those types of elements that we're going to need. Obviously, this kind of stays persistent. And we'll start thinking about, well, what happens then? Maybe it's like a 1.1. But the next step is that they would go straight to search results. Now, what do search results look like? Maybe there's like a back button. Maybe we got our search at the top, whatever we wrote. Maybe we have some information about the amount of results. I don't know, maybe there's a filter up here. Let's draw a little filter icon. Not the best, but it works. And they get the results here. Now, here we start thinking about, well, what do they see? What can they interact with? I know that they could be, if we split these up, maybe they seem more like cards like before, so they can tap the whole thing and go straight into like a product page that we've been sketching a bunch lately. But, there's probably a couple of other things that we can pull out here. Maybe we have that heart and users can go straight to our saved page, whatever that may look like. I started off with understanding that I'm going to be creating an interaction for this certain flow, searching for some sort of product. And I asked myself the question, well, what comes next? And now I'm asking the question of, well, what alternate scenarios are there? So there's a couple different scenarios here. Users can, from here, we have different flows. Users can go see a product. Users can save their products to a saved page. Users also can enter a new search. It can go all the way back. And users could even filter. Users could also kind of like just abandon the search if they want to. Maybe we have a persistent like navigation at the bottom. So there's so many different scenarios. Like what happens with filters? Maybe it's like another overlay. It comes down from the top, nice little animation. And, I'm starting to think about these animations a little bit more, these micro interactions, because if I leave them all the way to the end of the project, they're not going to look good. They're going to look amateur, and you should really incorporate motion early on. They really help a lot with different types of things like feedback and understanding the state of a screen. And we're going to do a whole lesson on motion later, but it's great to just start thinking about it right now. So this is like our filters. We're just going to call it fill. And now I could start thinking about the content here. Now we're branching out, and that's totally fine. Sometimes I don't branch out. Sometimes I just kind of stop here and I start refining this kind of flow. But it's pretty cool to start thinking about all the different types of things that you're going to need to account for, like the different types of UI elements, different types of content. So if I think about filtering for a product like this, there's a title, maybe people are going to want to filter for something like price. So that may be an option. Maybe it's by customer review, or maybe it's by like newest items. Maybe there's another section where it's by review, solely by review. So we can start thinking about what we're going to need to actually implement moving forward. It's going to really help us in the future. And this is why we actually just kind of sketch and, just do it quickly. So take some time to really go through that. Like I said, don't get bogged down by the details. Like you could tell that we just went through it really quickly and we learned a lot about what possibly could be in our application. We created a bunch of screens and we have a really good like jumping off point. But now we can take these, use them for like user flows, use them for our sitemaps, and even start building wireframes like ASAP. The whole point of sketching is to just be lean, be agile, and don't get bogged down by the details. Ignore things like dribble, or where you see like really high definition like sketches. Just go for it, jump right in. And that's it for sketching screen states. So we're back again in concepts, and we're just going to go through some quick tips just to kind of wrap everything up in terms of sketching. So let's just give ourselves a little title here. I'm going to repeat a couple of things that I've been talking about, but I really want you all to understand how important they actually are. Number one is don't worry about being messy. go, jump right in, ask yourself those questions and just keep going. Like you saw, I created a home screen pretty quickly and I started understanding that, maybe we do need these elements here. They're going to probably be useful. And I started learning about what content I can actually get from just like a quick sketch like that. And from there, we can actually go in and start refining that a bit more. Add icons, figuring out maybe that's an avatar, figuring out what type of information goes in here. Like we found out that we needed a heart and maybe we need a price tag. Most definitely need a price tag, but this is the kind of stuff that it's just a natural progression. And you don't worry about drawing something like this because eventually it's going to get to something even better and to the product that we eventually build. Don't worry about being messy. Like I said, be lean, agile, sketch quickly, and save yourself some time instead of worrying about the details. The next tip is, it takes a little practice, but only a little. Think about it as building blocks. All you need are some squares, rectangles, maybe circles, and you can build a fairly decent UI like we've done before. Like our cart screen is, there's just an X, whatever text we have there. We have a square, some lines, another square. To us, we understand what we're building here. We can refine that if we're going to present it to teammates. We got a fairly good understanding of what we need to build a screen like this. Don't worry about it too much. If you want to have a little bit of practice, like you can go and open an app that you love or a website that you love and, try just sketching that out, just using some shapes or like some basic type. And eventually you'll just develop your own type of system for sketching. And there really is no wrong or right way to do it. It's just whatever is going to work for you. Next tip, keep your sketches safe. Buy yourself a folder, please. I mean, if you're doing it digitally, that's great too, because like services like this will allow you to like export it in JPEG or whatever file format. It doesn't really matter for sketches like this. If you're using paper, store it in a folder, scan it right away, take a picture, please, because I can't count how many times I've lost sketches that I really needed or I really liked. And sometimes you lose details. Just remember, keep them safe. Always be prepared. Keep a sketch pad near you, a pencil, a pen with you. On my desk at home, I always have my sketchbook. It's a dotted line sketchbook, so it's really easy for drawing wireframes and stuff like that. So keep something with you if you like to draw digitally, like on an iPad, or if you have a tablet that you draw on, like a Wacom tablet. Keep that by your side because, you never know when an idea is going to come. You just never know when you need to sketch. Keep it by your side. Another thing I like to do is I like to hang my sketches up. So like say if I have some sort of like board beside me or a wall, I just like to hang up my sketches for some inspiration, and then I just write additional notes. If I'm working from home, I have my whiteboard that I hang up, and it serves as a daily reminder just so I can like see what I've been thinking about. I can maybe scrap some ideas. I can maybe take this new idea that I have or this old idea I have, and maybe something else comes from it because I've taken some time to just take some breathing room. Just put it up for yourself. And if you're working with teams, they help as well because other people can kind of get into it and they can start to provide some valuable insight. You want to keep people on your team participating. So that's the best thing I've always found is just put your sketches up, share them. And that leads me to like my next tip over here. My next tip is to kind of communicate. Just please communicate. Don't hide these gems that you're making. And I call them gems because like every product starts from something like this. That may not seem true, but that's what really is the skeleton of your product. They'll always start from like a messy sketch. So share them with people because this is a collaborative process. Share them with your team. Talk to every teammate. It doesn't matter. They'll always provide valuable insights. We talked a little bit about like a certain feature over here where there was going to be a carousel. We'll just quickly draw it again. And if a user swiped left, the new image would come in. And if I were to develop a feature like this or build a feature like this, first person I would talk to would be a developer. And I would like to understand, is this feasible for our timeline? What's the best way to do it? And you can have those conversations early on. Next thing I like to do is I mentioned it briefly about like putting your sketches up, but some people like to get a big whiteboard and sketch on a whiteboard. And that's totally fine too. I love sketching on whiteboards. Now, it's very collaborative and it's easy to involve team members in this discussion. And, when you're just drawing screens, everyone can kind of just come in, point certain things out. Because it's marker, nobody really gets tied to the details. Everyone's thinking about like the overall flow. You have so much space. Sometimes you'll be surprised at how fast you can actually fill that up with your whole team. And what I also like to do is I like to pin my sketches there as well. So maybe they have some sort of relation to a certain screen. It's a good jumping off point for yourself so you can kind of go back to your desk or wherever you're working and start thinking about different things that could relate. And one of the last tips I have, and I do this fairly often, sometimes I'll grab a sketch. So if I have our search experience, like so, it's easy to just sketch these out, but sometimes you don't necessarily get like a feel for the product. That's natural. It's because it's on paper or it's just static. And sometimes you want to understand, like, how does that feel when a user actually clicks this? So what you could do is you can export like individual frames, any which way you want to do it. Like you can export this whole thing here in concepts, this whole canvas, and you can kind of duplicate it and crop it to crop out each individual frame. And you can bring it into Figma and link it together in a prototype. And bam, you have like something super simple, and it'll give you a little bit more context on how it will actually work in the digital product. So sometimes I'll do that, or I'll scan in a sketch, and that will really help me to figure that out if things actually work while I'm tapping it on a mobile screen. It'll also give me a sense on, these elements need to be bigger than I thought. Maybe it's not going to work here. So like on a home screen, we thought about things like the little hearts, but maybe we'll realize that that's not really feasible for our user to tap. Maybe it is for larger images on a mobile screen, but maybe if we're thinking about smaller ones, maybe we leave that out there because it's a little confusing and a user may go to tap that and then actually tap into the image when they didn't want to. And where do they go? They go to like that product description page that we've been talking so much about. All these different tips are going to really help you create a much better user experience. It's going to help you like drive that communication throughout the whole team, create that collaborative process. At the end of the day, it's going to make you a better designer. It's going to make your users happy. So follow these tips, follow that process we talked about earlier in the lesson, and you're well on your way to sketching some amazing interactions and different types of flows.